This video is for graphing reflections across the X and across the Y. So if it's across the X, you're going to flip it across the X axis. If it's across the Y, you're going to flip it across the Y. All right, so for this one, we're going to reflect across the X. So your rule here, if you start out with X comma Y, what you're going to do is you're going to change the Y to a negative point. So, for example, A is at 1, 3. So all I would do is make the Y value negative. That's all I've got to do. So I'd be at 1, -3, and that would be A prime. So the same thing with B. The X is going to stay the same. 4, 5, 6. The Y is just going to change. And then for C, we're at 6, 3, so we would be at 6, -3. And then you can just connect the dots. So A would be 1, -3. B would be 5, -6. And then C would be at 6, -3. All right, so same thing here. We're going to reflect across the X. So all I do is whatever the Y is, I just change the sign. Okay? So the F here, the X is going to stay the same, but instead of being at 1, 2, 3, 4, positive 5Y, it would be at negative 5Y. Same thing with G. And so J is at positive 3Y, so it would be at negative 3Y. And then H would be the same. All right, so F is now at 1, 2, 3, at -4, -5. G is at 2, -5. H is at 1, -3, and J is at -3, -3. All right, so now we're going to flip across the X. So your rules for, or flip across the Y, I'm sorry. For this one, you're going to change the sign of the X. So for example, X here, this X is at 0, or no, 2, 3, 4, 5 is at -5, 0. So I've got to change the sign. So it's already a negative, which means it would become positive. All right, so Y, this is at -3, so it would now be +3. That's an X. And then this one is at -2, so it would now be at +2. All right, so X is now at 5, 0. Y is at 1, 2, 3, 3, 5. And then Z is at 2, 3. All right, and then one more time across the X axis. So again, we're changing the sign of the X. So here, the X is at +1. So now it's going to be at -1. Here it's at 4, so it would be at -4. Let's see, here it's at 2, so it would be -2. And then this one is at 6, so it would be -6. And so here's our points, -1, -1. This one would be -4, -1. Let's see. Oop, this says O. Oop. This should be a P. I'm sorry. And that should be a Q. Huh. Okay, so the Q is at -2, -6, and the P is at -6, 1, 2, 3, -4. Okay. And then on the other sheet you have this one. It's the same thing. You're just going to write the new coordinates. So across the X means the Y is going to change. So you make the Y negative. So here it's at 3. So it would be at -3. Here it's at -1. So it would be at +1. Here it's at -3. So it would be at +3. And here it's at -1. So it would be at +1. And then your new points would be 1, -2. E is at 5, -2. F is at 7, +1. And G is at 1, 1. All right, so now we're going across the Y. So we're going to change the sign of the X. So here we're at a +1. So it would need to go, or we're at a -1, I'm sorry. So it would go to +1. N is at +1, so it would go to -1. P is at 5, so it would go to -5. And then Q is at 4, so it would go to -4. Okay, so M is now at 1, 3. N is at -1, 6. P is at -5, 6. And Q is at -4, -2. And then finally on the bottom, all it asks you to do is to reflect across the X. So remember, it needs to flip across that X line. So this point is going to stay the same. Right here where we're at -3, it would come up to +3. And then here we're at -3 again. So that one would go up to +3. And then we're flipping across the Y. So we're flipping this way. We change the X's. So this one's going to stay the same, but this X is at -2. So it would be at +2. And then this one's at -4. So it would be at +4. So that's it for this video.